Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Inky Thoughts podcast. Today, I'm joined by a man that, if you like a bit of fitness, like I try to be into, like most people that want to be a little healthy, and if you like a bit of humor on the side and tattoos, this man might be the perfect mix, and he will most likely have popped up somewhere in your social media feed, I would imagine. His name as well is quite interesting. Beyond the Tats. You may have seen that username around there. Well, today we're gonna get perhaps a little bit into that username as well, but mostly get into how he both manages to capture people's attention and help them get more healthy, but also does it with a smile and a grin and a bit tongue in cheek and some humor to go along with it all. But before I butcher his reputation by rambling on, I'll let Chris introduce himself. Please, Chris.
Hi, yeah, my name is Chris Holt. First off, thanks for having me on. This is exciting. Yeah, I'm just an online nutritional coach, and I just really help people focus on more of their relationship with food, psychology with food.
Mm.
And I primarily, my demographic is typically like women between the ages of 40 and 60. So, but yeah, that's really my purpose is just to give mostly mothers, for the most part, the support that they need and are often too scared or just not able to ask for. So it's just giving them daily accountability, daily emotional support to help them not only lose weight, feel better, function better, but to make sustainable change.
Well, I mean, that is, as you say, and as you sort of said between the lines there, it is quite difficult when you've become a mother, especially I imagine at the start. I'm not a parent myself, but known a few, including my own. It's difficult when you're a new parent to figure out, oh shit, how do I manage all this stuff? How do I fit this into an hour and even busier day? So I imagine you have quite a lot of gratitude for people you managed to help with this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, look, I've worked with men and women, but primarily mothers. And what I've realized over 15 years is that mothers always put themselves last. And then what happens is over time, for most of them, they kind of lose themselves. And so then uh, they're pouring from an empty cup. And so it's challenging for them to ask for help or focus on themselves because then they start experiencing mom guilt. And
Oh
honestly,
yeah.
this is something that I think men deal with. I mean, I'm not a father, but I think it's too often where the mothers I've worked with, they're really just making the ship function, right? And making sure it's on course for the most part. So my goal is to try to dispel a lot of that guilt and
Mm.
help them understand that the most selfless thing you can do as a parent is to be selfish. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're just showing up as a subgrade version of yourself for the people that rely on you.
I couldn't agree more because you can't. You should make sure your own house is safe before you help the neighbor with their burning house. Because else
Exactly.
you're gonna be more broken than you were before you helped them. So I
Yeah.
really get that. It's quite a beautiful sentiment as well. I'm curious though, because you help people, and when you talk about mothers and that, no, I know it can be quite different in the US and in Scandinavia as well. We're quite open-minded. At least we very much used to be even more open-minded. And you, as we spoke about before the interview, you lived here, so you might be able to notice some of the similarities and differences as well. But do mothers usually do quite well with your appearance, with the tattoos and everything? Because I mean, I imagine
Yeah.
it's not. It depends on on where you might be in the US as well.
Well, my clients range anywhere from all over the United States,
Oh,
Canada, Europe, Southeast Asia.
mm,
So they're all over the place, but I think that was the biggest uh, because I work with a team. And so my team originally, the marketing team, they were very confused as to why most of my clients are women, right? Because I don't
mm,
come across as I look the way I do, right? So I think what happened is that I started a while ago, started producing content that was funny, lighthearted,
mm,
silly. I can make fun of myself. I can wear a wig. I really don't give a shit. Like I want to make something that or talk about serious topics within a funny context, right? And I
mm.
think that once they did a deep dive on my platforms, they said, "Look, you exude like a best friend, girl's best friend vibes." So I think that my humor and my sense of humor uh, makes me a little disarming. So I think women
Mm.
feel like, okay, well, he's someone that makes me laugh. He looks the part, so maybe this would be an option, right? So I think that's the humor is really, I think, what gets when past all the tattoos. So
mean, I think you're onto something there because I mean, when I first started following you, I think like 1 or 2 years ago, that was also what sort of got me following you. That I thought, oh, this is quite interesting. Like he's covered in tattoos. He looks sort of the regular, like what most men, if they're very ignorant, be like, oh yeah, he's part of the crowd. He's like one of these. Ugh. But instead,
He's a
you came
bro.
across
Yeah.
as a very down to earth guy that made fun of yourself, fun of classical masculine mindsets, fun of like certain fitness misconceptions. So, like as you said, very disarming, very down to earth, very charming in a way. So I couldn't agree more with your marketing team with
Well, I
I
just
think humor goes a
accidentally
long
did
way.
that, and that's what kind of happened. So they were just
Mm,
trying to understand it. And so I think also because I'm very, very transparent on my platform. So
yeah.
I talk about all the lows. And I think that that's
Mm,
the biggest issue with social media in general is that people only want to show highlights
mm,
when it's like, look, if you have, I don't care what audience you have. I don't care if you have 100 followers or if you have 100,000 followers. I personally believe if you're posting on that on a regular basis, it's important to share the shitty parts because
mm,
we're all struggling, right? And
mm,
so I think when I went through my open heart surgery, I went through a divorce, I went through a breakup of like a past engagement. These were like lows in my life, right?
mm,
And kind of sharing those allowed me to A, kind of process things, but
mm.
B, show that, hey, people might look at me and say, wow, he's got his shit together. But I'm like, no, I'm just like you. I'm just trying to figure life out and I'm just, taking one day at a time. So
I think that's also important with the message you try to say because normally when you see people be like, "Hey, you should work out whenever you get the chance and all that stuff," you always see these perfect pictures and they go, "Yeah, but your life seems together, so that's why you can do it." So when you actually share openly, well, yeah, but I also have fucking pits I fall into and have to crawl up again. Then it also becomes way more real and way more realistic and authentic when you say, "Hey, get down in the gym, it might help," you
yeah,
know.
exactly. And I think that, movement is important, obviously, for physical and mental health, but there are so many other facets to
Yeah.
someone's life, right? It's like, look, I will say this till the day I die. Poor sleep is going to send you to an early grave
Mm,
before poor food. So we need to hyper focus on sleep hygiene. We need to talk about stress management because most people are struggling psychologically, and most people don't know how to manage stress. So we need to focus on those things, and then we'll focus on how you feel your body, and then we'll focus on maybe getting some movement. We need to focus on bonding with loved ones. We need to focus on getting outside, getting fresh air, getting in
mm.
nature, grounding, doing some Danish people cold exposure, right? Like that's the thing. You leave your babies outside
Yeah.
to nap, their faces in the cold. It's great, but
Yeah, I
that's
mean
there's
that's
science behind that,
I
right?
mean Denmark is especially renowned for that one. Yeah, leaving the children outside to sleep before any Americans come at me. It's very normal. Nobody
Very
takes them. Nobody steals your baby here. They just sleep outside in a
yeah.
stroller. Not on a we don't put them on a random bench in wrapped in a blanket or something like that. In a stroller. You call them strollers over there, right, Chris?
Yeah.
The
Yeah, the stroller. Yeah.
Yeah, I always forget what they call them in the US,
Yeah,
so I
no,
never
no.
have
But like
a.
it's like things like that where I think there are a lot of health benefits to, as you know,
Hmm.
heat, cold, contrast, stuff like that. But ultimately, it's just helping people understand that there's more to health and wellness than just diet and exercise.
Hmm. I think another point you put across very well, and you sort of said it a little bit already, is the fact that you're being very authentically yourself, and that also shows other people that hey, you don't have to
Yeah.
betray who you are to try and do these things. You don't have to sell yourself short or say, oh, you're not gonna be into this hobby or you're not gonna do this shit just because you want to be healthier. You can absolutely be yourself as well, you know.
Yeah, it's finding your path, and everyone's path is obviously different. Everyone's goals are different.
Mm.
But I think too often, people fall into these I don't know, societal pressures of like where they think they
Yeah.
should be, when it's really like, look, forget that, right? Like you need to do A, what makes you happy, B, something you can stick to, right? Because if you can't do it every day, don't do it, right? That's kind of my philosophy.
No, I get it. I
So,
mean, you have to figure out how it works for yourself, you know. You have
mhm.
to figure out what because there's no such thing as a one size fits all with most things.
No, of course not. I think I say that all the time. Like, there's no one size fits all plan for anyone when it comes to nutrition.
Hmm.
I do think there's a good jumping off point for most people,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
ultimately, everyone's lives are different. Everyone's jobs are different.
Yeah.
Their days look different. So my goal as a nutritional coach is to I meet people where they're at, but
Yeah.
also I'm here to nudge you outside that comfort zone, right? And I think too often comfort zones are the easy choice. And so what I try to instill in my clients and what I talk about on social media a lot is, specifically in my life, I'm at a point in my life, my siblings and I are going to be 42 next month. I am actively, almost obsessively looking for hard things to do every day. And those hard things could be going for a walk when I didn't want to go for a walk, or doing a really tough workout, or doing something that makes me uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but doing that every day. And so people reach out and they'll say, wow, look, you look this way and it must get easier. And then I look at them, or I say to them, I'm like, I don't know what world you live in, but life only gets more challenging.
Yeah.
So the difference between me and you is that my threshold for difficult, my threshold for tough is higher than yours. So it's just a matter of desensitizing yourself to those things. And that's just exposure, right? So left to our own devices, we will always choose the easy route, right? The comfortable route. So my job is to say, hey, look, it's easier to eat a cookie and cope with stress with it. The more challenging choice would be not to do that and say, hey, I choose not to have that.
Yeah.
And those little things, as you know, little things add up to big things. So it's just,
Absolutely.
Baby steps, but it starts with accountability, because
Yeah.
if you don't have someone holding you accountable, you're going to choose the easy path.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with people often over punish themselves once they've made the choice that was the easy one
Oh,
as
go big
well.
or go home. Like, oh, I've already messed
Yeah.
up, so I might as well keep going, type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Then they also, psychologically start berating themselves for doing that stuff, which doesn't help them either, because then they don't feel up for it anyways. Like there's this level of forgiveness that goes into it too, I feel at times. Like you have to, if you fuck up, or like let's say you're on a nutrition plan and then you suddenly you take a cookie when you shouldn't. You should forgive yourself for that, because if you berate yourself for it, then you're just gonna fall off the wagon, and then you're gonna fall
That's
into the
and that's
cookie
part of the
jar.
psychology, right? It's the stories that we tell ourselves, it's the words that we use.
Mm.
And what I also instill with my clients is just understanding, just telling them that, hey, look, life is stressful. We get that, right? There's always going to be a reason or an excuse to do something, but you got to give yourself some more grace, right?
Yeah.
Because I have clients, and we all are either have or will. I view it like this, and I think I saw something. I think it was Shia LaBeouf that said something like this, but he said the only guarantee in life is suffering. It's the only guarantee for all of us. Now you have a choice, right? What are you going to do with that suffering? Are you going to allow it to dictate where you go and define you, and then you use that as a scapegoat? Or are you going to use that suffering and either empower yourself or help others? And that's where my mental health and my mental illness with anxiety, depression, PTSD, I thought it was always going to be this hurdle that was always going to stop, or a barrier that was going to stop me from reaching my potential. And then over time, I realized, holy shit, this is a superpower. Like now I can empathize and help people that struggle with this stuff, because I've been able to manage it for over 40 years. So, I tell people, look, depression is not going away, right? If you struggle with depression, anxiety, or PTSD, this stuff it's part of you right now. So, and will be. So we need to learn how to coexist with it rather than just ignore it.
Couldn't agree
So
more. Couldn't agree
yeah.
more as a sociologist that it's a matter of perspective of people think these things can be cured, and when you think things can be cured, they also become something that's separate from you and something that sort of becomes an enemy, an antagonist in your life, and you need to overcome it all the time. Whereas, as you say, coexisting with it is much more important, because once you have stuff like that, it's usually not going to go away.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
something you can learn to manage, something you can learn to notice the symptoms, so to speak, of, and all that stuff. I couldn't have said it better myself. If you sort of learn to live with it, if you learn to I recognize the signs of when you might have feel it more strongly, or notice what might trigger that, you can also learn to preempt that, or build defenses around that, or build certain off ramps, so to speak, where you're like, oh shit, I know that's going to be a trigger. I'm going to do this that helps cope with that, or that,
And that's
absolutely.
what I help people with, is helping them not only develop tools, but like you said, a game plan, right? It's not going to be perfect every time when you have triggers that hit you, but as long as we have a lot of tools to pull from,
Yeah.
the chances of you completely derailing decrease over time, as long as we're consistently implementing these things. And that's how you change patterns. You do something differently, right? And yeah, I think, with all my clients, that's what it's all about. It's just helping them understand that it's the stories that we tell ourselves, it's the words that we use, they all have power, right? And it's my job. At the very best, I can give you reframing. At the very least, I can just be a soundboard, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
great.
yeah.
I mean, both help a lot. I'm curious though, as a social scientist, did your tattoos help at all with like the way you saw yourself in regards to this? I don't know when you started getting tattooed. That's perhaps an interesting thing to talk about first.
Yeah.
When did you get
So
into tattoos?
yeah, so I might have been, my first tattoo was like a nautical star on my chest. I got that when I was like 21, maybe.
Oh,
Um, and what started it for me, um, being a identical triplet, I think
hmm.
there are lots of issues of like, well, I want to have my own identity. I don't want to be
Oh, I know
associated.
that feeling. As an
Yeah,
identical twin, I absolutely know what you're talking about there.
yeah, right. So, and it's weird because I have friends that are twins. I haven't met many triplets, but like I have a close friend here, two close friends here in Salt Lake, and they're identical twin sisters, and their relationship is very different from me and my siblings.
Hmm.
So, like they're all about matching, and they'll like have the same style, or they'll
Yeah,
support it,
nope, nope,
right?
nope.
And then she told me, she's like, I think that's a guy thing, right? I think it's a little different. And then she's like, well,
My
triplets cooks in the kitchen, right? So like it's a little different. But I think for me, it was a way of, all right, this is going to make me different
mm.
than my brother, and then one of my siblings. So Jeremy um, he's non-binary, so I have to just be very mindful of pronouns. Um, but yeah, so I think because of being triplets and then a lot of other circumstantial things, I think also being a Korean adoptee because we were adopted into a white family, there's some identity issues there with like
Mm.
me identifying as a white person, but I'm not. Like, so that's a little weird. But ultimately, tattooing for me started by just separating myself from them.
Mm.
And then I always said, I'm just going to get one. I'll
Yeah.
never tattoo my hands. I'm never going to tattoo my neck. I'll never tattoo my legs. I'm never tattoo my back. And now it's just like, I just want a full suit. So,
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that. Well, you always move the goalpost with how much you want once you realize, hey, that was not so bad having one to two, and I kind of like how that looks and how it feels and all that stuff. And then suddenly you're like, maybe we can go for a chest, maybe we can go for.
yes. Yeah. 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 I mean, it just snowballs. And
Mm.
I think, and I talk to a lot of my friends that are heavily tattooed as well. I think it does get more painful as you age.
Oh
So
yeah,
like,
no, 100% agree. The
yeah.
more
So
you
I'm like,
get and the more you age, it gets worse.
yeah. So I'm like, I just need to get the stuff done. So yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I agree with you there. I mean, I might be a bit younger, but it's already getting very painful for me. But you learn to manage the pain even as it gets
Yeah.
more painful. So I sit very
Way.
well, but it is
Yeah.
worse than it ever was before when I get to
Yeah.
two nowadays.
And my artists don't live where I live, so I have to fly to
Oh.
them. And so when we do that, we do 7 to 9 hour sessions just because I'm like, I'm here, let's just get this done. So my last session was about 7.5. We finished this like leg sleeve to my back to my neck is
All right,
something
yeah,
on
nice.
with this artist for over 10 years. So it was really nice to like finally finish it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was a nice moment.
I mean, I imagine so. You always feel proud of yourself when you finish a tattoo project, even though you're not the artist. I know that, but
Yeah,
you feel proud of yourself when you finish a big project. Anyways, you've gone through that. You've gone through especially when you've gone through the pain and it looks cool. And that's
yeah,
that's also the feeling I wanted to get into a bit because I know how I feel whenever I get a new tattoo. I feel this surge of confidence, and a lot of research also talks about this. So that's why I sort of asked as well about has it helped you a bit with your self-image? I know personally speaking, it's helped me quite a bit with learning to like my looks as well, even though it might not, and get away from this idea other people might have or society might put up of
yeah,
a perfect body or how you should look, and instead focus on how I want to look, you know?
yeah. I think for me, I mean, tattoos for me have always just been a personal expression. And I think
Mm,
it is for everyone for the most part.
mm,
With regards to my identity, I don't know. I think, to be very honest, when I started getting tattooed, I was in college and I went to the University of Miami School of
mm.
Architecture. I was there for some 5-year program, and I was in a fraternity, and then I was on the co-ed cheerleading team for the university. So
Okay.
a lot of diverse groups of friends. But the number one thing that I had the most difficulty with, I think, in school, let's be very honest, I think I was very terrible at talking to girls. Like I just,
Okay.
and I thought, oh, well, if I get, and this is a stupid thought, but like maybe if I get used, it'll be an icebreaker for
Mm.
someone. Right?
Well, it can be at times. I mean,
It can, but
it's
that was
just
initially
yeah.
like in the beginning. And then I was really obsessed with Travis Barker, and I just loved
Uh,
the look of just tattoos, even though he does a lot of patchwork that turn into a suit.
mm,
But I was like, yeah, it looks so cool. So yeah, I mean, I would say that tattoos at this point, I mean, yeah, they're a very large part of who I perceive myself as, right? Because if I just didn't have any tattoos today, I would probably look at myself and be very uncomfortable. I'd be like, no.
yeah.
And I think also sometimes the tattoos in a weird way also, I don't know, they kind of maybe make me feel safe.
Mm,
Um, like it's like armor,
yeah.
in maybe a subconscious way. Because I have a lot of trauma, I have a lot of walls, and I think it helps me feel like I can exude a tough exterior when I'm like a teddy bear, right? So
Yeah.
that's, I think, and I guess I just never thought of it like that until this moment, but I think maybe that's it.
No, I think there's some very important points to what you're saying there, and it reminds me of two different. Well, it reminds me of three things actually. First of all, you're not the first one to call it armor, if that helps you. I had a very great tattoo artist on here called KD Mizuno from California, Berkeley, who does
Okay.
these massive blackmail pieces. She mainly talks about clients, especially women she tattoos, where they feel like it's armor, it's sort of protection and a guard against stereotypes they have to face and these presumption of how women should look and all this shit. But that's the thing. I think you're very correct. It is an armor against all these pressures to conform and be how other people want, which can make you feel scared and conflicted and anxious about who the fuck are you in the world. Tattoos, and this leads into the other thing it reminds me of. Tattoos, as a sociologist said back in 1999 already, he said it's the anchor of the self in late modern society. Uh, which is,
I
I
like
think there's some truth to that. It does sort of anchor you, gives you a safe harbor in yourself, because even if you lost all your things, all that stuff,
Yes.
hypothetically speaking and in hyperbole, you sort of still know who you are, and you still have all these bearers, whether they mean something or it's just for aesthetics, as long as you have chosen them for yourself, you still have
Yeah.
all these markers of who you are and what you want to be perceived as, or at least perceive yourself as, and all that. And that's very healthy. It's very anchoring of who you are, even without
Yeah.
having to think of it very deeply. But what you said reminds me of that in a way. It's an
Yeah.
armor, it's an anchor, it's this safe haven you built within yourself.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that, in the very beginning, I wanted all my tattoos to have a very deep meaning. Like that
Mm,
was the only way I was going to get
been
tattoos.
there
So I
as
was like,
well.
it have to be um, a constant in my life forever, right?
Mm,
And then over time, you know, some of my tattoos have zero meaning, but for
yeah,
me, it's more about just do I like it? If I
yeah,
do, that's the litmus test for me. That's enough, right? So like people ask, well, what does your next sleeve mean? I'm like, dude, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a bunch of patterns, sharp lines. It's like, no, it just aesthetically looked pleasing, and it was something that me and my artist, designed and together. But ultimately, at this point, I don't overanalyze whether it has a deep
no.
meaning. And again, those are great, and I still get those types of tattoos. But
Mm,
other ones are just things I like, right? And so, and then once you get to a point where you're, heavily covered, now it's
yeah.
just like things like this bothers me, all this blank space. Like,
I know the feeling, mate.
yeah, yeah. I know for this sleeve, I didn't have my elbow done. For some reason, the
All right,
artist that did the sleeve didn't do my elbow, and I had one of my
man.
he has two sleeves, and he would just give me so much shit. He's like, it's not technically a sleeve, but you didn't do that elbow. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So an artist that was here locally, that was like a traveling artist, and I saw some of his
Yeah.
work. So and he tied it in beautifully with what was
I mean, it
here.
looks great. If you hadn't said it, I would have thought it was part of it originally, to be
Oh, I
honest. So
know.
it's
Like
very
you
well done. Yeah.
literally, this was
Yeah.
completely
It
blank,
fits
and
the
I was like,
aesthetic really well, man.
yeah. So it was good, but I hate to admit, but he was right. So uh, yeah, but yeah, I just think that tattoos are, it's like I think that's why so many people bond and
Mm,
instantly connect with someone that is heavily tattooed. And you had talked about women getting tattooed to, break these stereotypes of what women should look like. But then also when people are heavily tattooed, then we also then get put
yeah.
in a box, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, and I mean, I have so many people that
Yeah.
don't approach me. I'm not approachable. I get that, right? With the first time I saw someone with face tattoos, head tattoos, neck sleeve, I was like, oh my God, that guy looks really intense. And so I understand that, but that leads into, my handle on social media. The reason I chose Beyond the Tats is because I think too often people, I think we all judge, we all kind of do
Yeah.
that, right?
I don't think
Based
you
on,
can escape that, but I get what you mean. What you mean.
but it reminds me also that I also am at fault for that. But like, you really can't judge someone based off of face value. Um, and there's more layers to me than, fitness, muscles, and abs and tattoos. So
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, absolutely couldn't agree more. Like that, that's the thing, and tying beautifully back to what you said earlier. Like that's why it's so important also that you show your authentic self through your social media and all that, because it shows that okay, he's more than just chiseled abs and a good physique, and he's more than just that tattooed man that looks good and all that. Like he's also this really funny guy. He is also a very considerate guy. Tries to, I mean, at least as far as I've seen on your pages, you also try to, do your best to help people around you and improve what you see around you. You try to leave the world better than you found it, so to speak.
absolutely.
And that's a very compassionate thing to do. But tying back to something else you said, which I found really important, and I just wanted to add something to it. I think the very important thing about tattoos is that you, like you said, you get to a point where they don't necessarily have a story or meaning in that sense tied to them, but they become meaningful in a different sense, I find. And it's because there's this commitment to yourself, which is sort of very directly parallel to what you do when you in your job and help people. You try to get them to commit to themselves, and it's sort of it's your own commitment to yourself as well. This I want to look like that, and I like do this stuff, and I like being tattooed, so I'm gonna be tattooed.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because every time I get tattooed, I always think, I don't think I can sit here for 7 hours. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And especially when I started large pieces, right? Like when
Mm.
we started my back, it's my whole back, my ass, my hands, it goes all the way down. And I was just like, I just
You
saw,
went full back. Jeez.
yeah, full back. And so I just thought, when I just saw the outline, I'm like, oh my God, I don't, that was rough. I don't see how I'm going to finish this. And it's just like anything else, you just chip away, right? And it's easy to, this kind of equates back to like some of my health issues. I had 4 lung surgeries, open heart surgery, like almost 2 years ago. But I always tell people, like, there was some advice I received from my high school basketball coach when I was living in Norway, actually.
Oh.
Um, I had my first lung collapse. I had my first lung surgery. I had first bout of depression, because I had identified with sports and being active my entire life, and now all of a sudden I couldn't do anything. And
Mm.
so my coach pulled me in his office and he says to me, Chris, I'm going to give you some advice that my football coach at Harvard gave me when I ruptured my spleen. I'm going to tell it to you. I'm going to say it to you, but I'm not going to explain it. And I'm like, okay. And I was angry. I was 16. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And he says, picture yourself straddling the line. Your left foot's in the past, your right foot's in the future, and you're pissing on the present. And at 16, I was like, what does that mean? He's like, get out of my office. And for years it haunted me.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's a brilliant way to give the advice, but it's just the punchline was also just absolutely
Yeah.
great. But I don't want it to
But
take away from the thing. I
no,
just
no, no,
couldn't help
no,
laugh.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it was so jarring
Yeah.
And then I realized what I was doing, I was constantly worrying about or dwelling on what had happened. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this lung surgery, why did this happen? And why did this happen to me? And I was asking questions that had no answers. And then you make yourself a crazy person. And then I was always worrying about the what ifs, right?
Mm.
So I always tell people, look, no matter what happens, just take the silver lining, let it go. You
Mm.
can't change it. And avoid falling into the pitfall of projecting too far forward. And what if this happens? What if this happens? It's like, look, you can't predict the future. If you want to really dictate where you want to go in this life, you have to focus on what you have control over, which is in the present. And of course, there's lots of books, Eckhart Tolle, Power Now, like all this stuff is great, but it's really challenging because our brains and our psyches are so inclined to gravitate towards drama. Like
Mm.
it's like a lot of us just want the chaos because it's almost an excuse to not really face reality or face the tough
Yeah.
situation. And so we all become our own self-saboteurs. And so it's just understanding that the only person that's stopping you in this life is really you. And that's it's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. But look, if you don't want to face that, then you're probably going to be stuck in whatever situation you're in.
It reminds me very much of another good piece of advice I once got, that if you, whenever you get stuck, you have to try and do something different. Because if you keep doing the same thing, you're just going to
Nothing
remain
changes
stuck.
if nothing changes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's it can be small things. You don't have to change everything about yourself. Some people think that they need big changes always. You can change small things. Like
Yeah. I
when I
say,
had to get into working out again at some point, like
yeah.
where I hadn't been into it for a while, I just said, well, okay, but just go once
Yeah.
and get into it
Exactly.
again. Like that's
Exactly.
the thing. Like you don't have to make big changes, then suddenly you're like, no, we have to go every time this week. And if I don't go, I'm a shitty
But,
person. Like that's
but
where you
that's part
fuck
of the
yourself up.
self-sabotage, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
part of the
exactly.
self-sabotage where people are like, a lot of people are just all or nothing type of people.
Mm.
Like if you are like that and you're constantly just not making change, then guess what? That's the wrong approach for you. You need to understand that, like you said, if it's for my, it's like, all right, today go for a 20-minute walk. That's it. Start there, right? Get some steps in, and then we build upon that, right? But I think too often people want results tomorrow. Their attention
Oh yeah.
spans are short because of social media, and they just, you know, I just tell people, look, if it was easy, I mean, nothing of value is easy, right? Like you have
Mm.
to, it's gonna be work, right? But that's what makes it great when you achieve those things because going back to like tattoos, it's like, this is tough, right? But then the feeling, the high that you get once you finish a session
Yeah.
or complete a piece, I feel invincible. I'm like,
I think this is a lesson many that are very young right now getting. There's a lot of small tattoos that are very in nowadays, and they take half an hour, and that's it. I think that's a lesson we learned when we went in for the full sleeves or the fucking chest pieces, all that stuff, or sat for some 6 to 8 hour sessions now and again, or multiple sessions. There's this thing with like committing to something and then slowly building it together with somebody else and waiting for the moment where it's complete. Because I remember when I got my ribs tattooed for the first time. I'm not going to go 2.5 hours at a time, but so it was a lot of sessions that year. But it was so gratifying when you get to the end and learning that patience of being like, yeah, it doesn't look good now, but in 6 months' time when
and,
we're
and
done with this, gonna look
it's
great.
it's also, I do believe, and I truly believe this. I think that pain, it's a vital emotion and thing that can help you grow
Hmm.
as a person, right? And of
Yeah.
course, no one wants to be in pain. No one wants to experience pain. But for me, it's like my first lung collapse. I had a chest tube inserted into my pleural space. This was done in Norway, and they don't give you anesthesia.
No, they
So
can't for that. That is
you're,
very difficult to do for that sort of thing.
yeah, so experiencing that whole thing awake and conscious and feeling everything, what it did for me and all the other surgeries I've had is that it made me quickly understand at a young age how fleeting life is, right? Things
Hmm.
can change in a blink of an eye, but also it aged me up. Like so a lot of people meet me or get to know me and they're like, wow, you're like an old soul. I said, well, yeah, because I've gone through a lot of physical pain, which I think ages you.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's a good thing. Personally, I'm grateful for it. If I had to do it all over again, I would. Um, but yeah, there's a I don't even know what his handle is, but he talks about this idea. Like, I think he's a CEO. He's like, I would, if someone has a back piece or a large tattoo piece,
Yeah, I saw this as well. He was
yes, it should
brilliant.
be a
I can't remember
factor.
his name either, but I couldn't agree more with him. That he was so infatuated with the commitment that goes
Yes,
into that.
you're patient. You don't want stuff tomorrow. You're willing to sit through it and like commit to it, right? That's a
And
huge,
follow a plan. Like that's the other
yes,
thing he was doing. Like,
yeah, yeah. So I thought, man, like, God, I wish people, companies
I
took it into consideration.
couldn't agree more.
That would be cool.
That was the same feeling I had. I even think I shared it when I saw it. Same feeling I had when I saw it. And I couldn't agree more actually with him that there are certain lessons, not universally. We've all met idiots with tattoos as well.
Yeah.
Not everybody's the same, but I will say most people I've met that can go through big tattoos are sort of more keyed into being like, hey, I can be patient. I can wait for this thing to turn good. I can wait for this thing to bear fruit. I can wait for this thing to complete. Whereas others are way more like, no, no, I need this now. Like the
Yeah.
kind of kids that open up their chocolate Christmas calendar on day one.
Seen that experiment where they put like uh marshmallows in front of a child. They're like, okay, if you wait 10 minutes, you'll get 10 marshmallows. But if you eat these marshmallows, you're not gonna get any more marshmallows. And they just do these videos with these kids, and it actually is a precursor, or not a predictor per se, but just showing that, that type of, instant, like I need it now, when the kids that wait longer are more likely going to be more successful in some aspects of their lives, you know?
Possibly. As a sociologist, I remained a bit skeptical, but it is nonetheless very interesting, because there are a lot of people where I think it's a lot to do with upbringings you have and stuff like that, how you either learn to be patient or not. Because some people, even adults, are terrible, as you say as well,
Oh yeah,
at
totally.
waiting for things to turn any sort of like way. And I think there's also this fear you talked about as well, where they fear what might happen if it goes on long. So if they get instant, they can react immediately and do something else. You even see it in some fucking CEOs out there that are like, no, no, I need the money now. I need this to turn a profit now. Whereas if they sometimes it comes out later that if they'd waited and like made this thing grow more, it could have been worth even more later on. But there's no patience to do that. Like you see it in all aspects, sadly, of life, that some people just can't wait. And
Yeah.
I would say, as we talked about with tattoos, I think right now it's also an economic thing to some extent for some people. They don't have money for big tattoos, but for others, we even saw it when there wasn't this problem. That some people just are like, no, no, I just want small tattoos all over the place. I want to get tattooed all the time. And I'm like, but some point later on, not to play the tattoo sociologist card and the guy who's researched what it means to identity, but I want to play that card a bit here. You might regret that because it just sometimes is way more gratifying to get not necessarily a full cohesive sleeve, but bigger tattoos that often carry just a bit more meaning to yourself.
I
Not necessarily in a story, not necessarily in a narrative tied into them, but they just often become more meaningful when they are bigger and require a bit more commitment to yourself and the piece.
I had this conversation with my girlfriend because she was thinking about getting some small things to do this sleeve. And I was like, look, you have some things on your arm, great. I think you should like plan out just one cohesive sleeve, right?
Even
And
if not that, just if you want to do patchwork, do like four or five or
yes,
at most six different things. Like don't go
yeah,
too small. I find often,
yeah.
when people
But
do
I
many
always
tattoos,
thought, like,
they
even
often
this
become so
arm,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, this arm is turning into patchwork,
yeah,
because I just did my forearm first. I don't know why. And then it was just this bare arm. And then I'm
yeah.
like, oh God, like that part of me regrets a little bit, but then also I'm like, okay, this is just going to be an area where I tattoo things that are like traveling tattoos, like
Yeah,
in
yeah,
different stuff like that, or countries. But I always tell people, like, look, I get it. I didn't have any money in college, so a lot of my
mm.
tattoos, my brother Justin gives me shit for. He's like, dude, those look like shit. I'm like, dude, I didn't have any money. You started getting tattooed, but you had like like adult money, right? Play
Yeah,
money. So he's going to like famous artists,
yeah,
Steve
yeah,
Moore,
yeah.
is like insane. But I'm like, I don't regret it. Like this
No.
is my
I have
story.
some cheap ones as well that don't look as good up on my shoulders, but don't regret it. As
Yeah,
you like you, I was young, I was in college.
yeah.
I should go to the US, and so I had even they even had a student discount, so I got them done.
What? Oh, lucky.
That was weirdly common when I did my undergrad in England back in the 2010 to 2013. Tattoo places with student discounts.
That is the first time I've ever heard that. That's
I've
interesting.
seen it never any. I've only ever seen it in England, actually. Only
Okay.
place I've ever seen it. And I can't speak for many places because England's quite big compared to where I'm from in Denmark, as you know. So don't know how it is in every place, but around that place in down in the Portsmouth and Southampton area of England,
Yep.
there was a few studios I went by that had in the window student discount with an ID.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
10%. Like,
No, there's some crazy artists out of
yeah,
like Denmark,
yeah.
England.
There's some
Um,
great ones. So one particularly famous one lately who also is I think you do CrossFit as you said before the interview. I think he does more traditional bodybuilding, uh,
okay.
like more strongman stuff and that. But he does that, and else he's like a sneakerhead and other kinds of nerd and that, and a very
Okay.
great tattooer called I don't want to pronounce it because I don't think many people will get it if I say it the way we say it, but it's Boye. That's his like last name and what he goes by.
I think that sounds familiar. Um, there's one artist, I think he's out of Great Britain, Luke Ashley.
Oh yeah, Luke Ashley. I've met him in person at a
I
Brighton
want
convention
my
this
palms
year.
done by
He's great.
him. Yeah,
He's great.
I want
Yeah.
my palms done by him.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, he is, as far as I can tell, currently the best one in the world at doing the palms. I mean, I've rarely seen stuff heal up as well. I don't know if you know of him, but he's a good friend of mine from up in I think he's in Maine. I'm not entirely sure actually, but up there called Matt Davis, the Ink Shrink on Instagram.
okay.
He's got his palms done by Luke,
Oh,
and his
I love,
fingertips as well on the inside done by Luke.
yeah, I would love to have my whole hand done or both
I
of
mean,
them.
preaching to the choir. I've been too poor for tattoos for a while, sadly.
Yeah, so
I do dream of filling up the whole body, but that is a slow project at the moment.
yeah, it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. So
It's sadly been over a year since I last got stuff done, but when I lived in Scotland, I got these three done. That was good.
nice.
I
Well,
mean,
you're lucky. This color looks really dope on your skin
oh, thank you
tone.
very much. Scotland, if you want to talk about a small country with a lot of great artists per square meter, per square inch, that's Scotland. There's some absolutely incredible artists there. One of my favorites I hope to one day get tattooed by when her books open when the moon is right and the fucking planets align or something. Is a incredible artist called Beth Rose out of Edinburgh in Scotland. Absolutely incredible.
I mean, look, I tell people you have not seen the color green until you've been to Ireland or Scotland. It's
I
just,
mean, Scotland is a good example too, but I haven't been to Ireland, but I have met Irish people, and even they, like when they live in Scotland, are like, yeah, this is great, and we love Scotland, but Ireland is still the next level. Like,
yeah, Ireland was amazing. So
I do want to go one day, but someday I'll go to Ireland. Annoyingly so, I didn't take the ferry over when I lived in
I
Scotland.
know we were right there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the story of my life. I always am right there, and then I forget to go and do shit because I'm too
yeah,
busy. Like I was trying to do a PhD, so I've always like stressed myself out of being like, "Hey, let's go to the Highlands if I have the money for it, or let's go over to Ireland." And just no, just stay here in the city and enjoy.
put on a bucket list.
Yeah,
There's always
of course. I'd still
yeah,
go back there, when I can.
yeah.
Probably not gonna make it this year, next year, but I will be back at the, for example, Scottish Tattoo Convention and the Brighton Tattoo Convention and stuff like that.
Oh,
Those are
cool.
very great in Britain, especially the Scottish one is amazing.
Nice.
Uh, but yeah, well, I've sort of been keeping you for a while. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, man.
Yeah, no.
And we sort of already on a lighter note, so it feels weird. I don't want to do my usual ending where I say let's talk on a lighter note because we already have quite a laugh noting on our tattoos. But I'm wondering, what is your next tattoo project? You were talking a lot about the
Um,
arm, the left
yeah.
arm, as far as I can tell.
My next right now, my right leg sleeve I want to finish.
Okay.
So it was started by a neo-traditional artist. He's out of San Antonio now. He was in Austin, Texas, but now he's in San Antonio. His name is Tony Colon.
Oh
The
yeah, yeah,
only is he's impossible to get a hold of now. So it's a little frustrating because he started this piece. I want him to finish it, but I don't see that happening. So the artist that I've done most of my work with out of San Francisco, Nakona, I talked to him about it. I said, I know I would never want some other artist to finish another artist piece, but can you do neo traditional?
I
And he
mean,
says,
you're in an impossible situation otherwise. So I mean,
yeah,
we don't want to be in that situation ever, but it does happen to people sometimes that somebody just drops out off the map or gets too busy or whatever, and then
yeah,
what can
yeah.
you
I
do,
think he's
man?
just gotten too like famous, and so he just
Oh
doesn't
man.
doesn't respond. So Nakona was like, "Look, if you're a good artist, you should be able to copy other styles." He says, "I could finish that for you." So then I said, "Okay, what about the rest of the leg?" And then he was tattooing my inner thigh when we were finishing this piece, and he said two things. First, he said, "I have a video of it." He's like, there's one trophy I don't have." I was like, "What's that?" He's like,
Oh
"The
God.
shaft." And I was like, oh, and he's like, I'm just saying. I was like, okay, well, maybe we could talk about that later. But like, what about this other leg? And he says, if you let me tattoo whatever I want, I'll do it for free. And I was
Oh
like,
wow. I mean, that
yeah,
is when you like the artist and really like their style, that is a
I
very hard
trust him.
offer to refuse.
Yeah, no, I trust him, and he's like a brother from another mother for me, and I've known him for so long. I was just like, yes, and he owns this tattoo studio in San Francisco called Manus Lux, but he lives outside of the city, and he lives on this beautiful farm. He's got a vineyard. He
Mm,
grows his own crops. He grows his own cannabis. He has chickens. Everything is just vegetables. It's like he's living off of this farm, and and he's got this huge kiln because he does pottery. Uh,
wow.
it's just so beautiful because he has a little tattoo studio set up there that's separate from the house. So I went to get tattooed out there for my next sleeve. We did 2 days back to back, and I just slept in this little cabin or a little extra house on his property, but
Nice.
no cell service. You go outside, there's no light pollution. The stars are crazy, and it was just the most amazing setting to get tattooed
Nice.
2 days in a row. But I think that's the next piece is just finishing this leg with him. So
Yeah, I mean, that is also a massive piece to do, finishing up a lake. I mean, people
yeah,
don't realize how much space is on the lake until you get a tattoo.
I know. It's
I mean, I've
like,
not even gotten my own legs tattooed, but I've just been around enough leg sleeves and seeing them get done in studios and conventions, all that, to know that you think you have a lot of space on your arm until you actually start working on a leg and see
yeah,
how much it
yeah,
takes to fill up.
100, yeah, 100%. So, but I mean, I have a lot of traveling coming up.
Mm.
Moving mid-year next year
All
to
right.
Tennessee. So I live
Okay.
in Utah now, but I'm moving to Tennessee, and so I have a lot of things going on. So I don't see myself getting out to San Francisco anytime soon, but it's definitely on the
That's
books.
always what the sucky part, isn't it? Like the managing, like, oh shit, my art. Like for me as well, most of the artists I want work done by are in Canada or Scotland, and I've never even been to Canada yet. So
Oh gosh.
that's always the pain when you really start collecting tattoos. Any advice for people out there? If you can find local artists that are great, because the pain we're in now with not knowing when
Yeah,
you're gonna both have the money, time, and the opportunity to go there, it's always a pain. Like it's really a pain because you really
yeah,
want work
yeah,
done by these people, and you really start wanting it by just them sometimes. That
yeah,
you single in on an artist you're just such a fan of, and you're like. It can't be anyone else now. It has to be this person.
absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
And it sucks because they're often really great and they're busy and you're busy and yeah.
It's a lot to align and schedule, but
But it's always worth it. I mean, when you make it happen,
oh,
it's
yeah,
always worth it. Like, I
yeah.
don't want to bitch and moan too much. It's always worth it. It's always great, especially when you bond with them and you have a good hangout. That's also the other thing I think people miss out on with the short sessions. Getting tattooed, despite the pain, is always a great hangout if you have a good artist that's nice.
If you like, I had an artist that did this sleeve, and I could not stand having a conversation with this guy. It
Oh,
was
that
really rough,
sucks.
and he was obsessed. All he could talk about was his wiener dog, and then he had this
What?
calendar of wiener dogs, and then he just wanted to like talk about them all the time. And I was like, dude,
Damn,
cool, your dog.
that's
I
strange, man.
I know. I'm like, stop
Like,
talking.
I
But yeah,
usually really like strange people, but That's fucking weird. Only wanted to talk about wiener dogs, man. I mean, I get
Yeah,
it. They're cute. They're very adorable dogs, but you gotta be able to talk about something else.
yeah. And he showed me the whole calendar every month. I was like, okay, I got it.
Jesus fuck. No, I mean, I get that, but I can't take up the whole session, man.
I know. No, it was literally like 6 hours of him talking about his dog. So, but I mean, you know, that's a good story.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So we're sort of nearing the end here, and I can't believe it. I really enjoyed this interview. It always feels sucky at the end. It always feels awkward, and you don't want to say goodbye. But I do want to first of all say once again, thank you so much for being on, Chris, and
Oh,
for doing this for me. I can't thank you enough for that. And the other thing is, even though I'm sure if people are watching this, they already know who Chris is. If you don't, your entryways to the internet and the social media space are weird and unrecognizable to me. In case people don't know who you are, could you plug yourself a bit and where they can find you?
yeah. Yeah. So you can find me on my platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Threads now. Those are really the only three right now. I mean, if you do YouTube Shorts, I know my team is trying to get me to do a YouTube channel. But you can follow me at Beyond the Tats. You can go to my website, beyondthetats.com, if you want to fill out an intake form, if you want to work with me on nutritional coaching. I work with people anywhere. So just fill out the intake form. We can jump on a free consultation call to discuss your goals, discuss what my program entails, and how to get started if you feel it's a good fit for you.
That's amazing, man. And again, really enjoyed having this conversation with you, man. And to anybody listening and watching, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this awesome episode with Chris. Absolutely incredible for him to come up on the podcast and share a lot of his insights and personal experiences with being heavily tattooed, both in regards to his work as a weight loss coach and CrossFit trainer and all that, as well as just in regards to his own self-identity. It was so interesting for me as an identical twin myself to hear about his experience being from a set of identical triplets and how tattoos have helped him stand out from his siblings. I felt the same with my twin brother being identical, that they also helped me in my adult life sort of claim my own appearance in a way. Not everyone is gonna recognize that in the same way somebody with an identical sibling might, but hopefully you found that interesting as well. Next time we're gonna be returning to one of my favorite sub-series of this podcast, Beyond the Gate, where I talk about marginalized groups within the tattoo industry and tattoo community. And I have the immense honor of welcoming Luca Weinberger on. Luca's already held talks and seminars for the American, I'm not sure if I know the acronym absolutely correctly here, but the Association for Professional Tattooers in America, APT as they're also known, where they did extremely well and was so warmly received. So I hope you'll receive them warmly on this podcast as well, as we're going to be talking about how it is to be a trans person in the tattoo industry and tattoo community, and why tattooing is important to trans people as well and such. It's going to be absolutely interesting, and I think there's a lot to learn from that type of episode especially. So I hope you'll look forward to it, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.